Devil worship in France are the question of Lucifer, a record of things seen and heard in the secret societies according to the evidence of initiates. A.E.Waite, 1896, of the Vulgar Era. Chapter 8, Dealings with Diana. The philosophy of Horatius is supposed to represent incompletely the content of heaven and earth, but neither earth nor heaven, as at present constituted, would be capable of enclosing the entire content of Dr. Bataille's memoirs. Miss Diana Vaughan, with whose history we are next concerned, comes before us under a different aspect. I have failed to ascertain under what circumstances the first became known in France. Le Diable au, I don't know how to say 19, siècle may have constituted her earliest introduction. She was certainly unknown to Leo Taxil when he published the Palladian Rituals, or she would not have escaped mention in the account he there gives of Miss Sophia Walder. However this may be, we have made her acquaintance in the course of the previous chapter, but I am constrained to state that she has, up to the present, shown herself exceedingly circumspect in substantiating the evidence of her precursor. The whole world is aware, and I need not again repeat, that Miss Diana Vaughan was converted to the Catholic Church some time after Dr. Bataille completed his astounding narrative. The problem with making up stuff about people, if you make up something really grand, like, oh, I don't want to lessen people's image of me, it puts that into people's minds, A Pilatist, a perfect initiation, comprehending the mysteries of the number 77 and doing reverence to the higher mystery of 666. I have playlists with 603 Grand Mistress of the Temple, Grand Inspectress of the Palladium, and according to him who, in a sense, has prepared her way and made straight her paths, a sorceress and a thaumaturge, before whose daily performances the black Sabbath turns white, Miss Vaughan quarrelled, as we have seen, with the sinister initiate, Sophia Walder, and conceived for the Italian Grand Master, Adriano Lemmy, the charity of the evil angels, which is hatred. When the supreme dogmatic directory of universal Freemasonry was removed from Charleston to Rome, and the pontificate passed over to Lemmy, as the revelations allege, Mrs. Vaughan closed her connection with the Triangles, carrying her colors to a vessel equipped by herself, and founded a new society under the title of the Free and Regenerated Palladium, incorporating the anti-Lemist groups, and soon after began a public propaganda by the issue of a monthly review devoted to the elucidation of the doctrines of the Lucifer cultus, and to the exposure of the Italian Grand Master, to hoist the black flag of diabolism, as Mrs. Vaughan would now term it. Thus, in the open day, naturally elicited a strong protestation from the Platist Federation, so that she was in embroilment not only with Lemmy, but also with the source of the initiation which she still appeared to prize. At the same time, she exhibited no indications of going over to the cause of the Adonites, becoming Adonites? Adonites. I'll just say Adonites. Becoming known to the anti-Masonic centers of the Catholic Church only through her hostility to Lemmy. She was always a persona grata, whose conversion was ardently desired, but on several public occasions she advised them that her cause was hers. Her cause and hers were in radical opposition, and that in fact she would have none of them. Being outside any need of their support, sympathy, or interest, she would cleave to the god Lucifer, which is Christ in the Easter Vigil. But no, if you make nature and all this other stuff, the person who's going to enlighten us about nature, that must be the good God. See, it's just a thought that Christians put in people's heads. And she aspired to be the bride of Asmodeus. At length, the long-suffering editor of the Revue Mensuelle, weary of his refractory protege, would also have none of her, though she surrendered her with evident regret to be dealt with by the prayers of the faithful. 1 month after M. Leo Taxil, through the medium of the prayers of the faithful. 1 month after M. Leo Taxil, through the medium of the same organ, announced the conversion of Mrs. Vaughan, and less than another month, namely in July 1895, she began the publication of her Memoirs of an Ex-Pilatist, which are still in progress, so that, limitations of space apart, my account of this lady will be unavoidably incomplete. Now, something, the black flags. You see black flags flying. They're probably of jihad, and jihad means struggle. It's not the same as holy war. It's not the same as diabolism. It's of change, black alchemy, steadfastness. But it's not about jihad and fi sabilillah is not what people, it's not some war cry. Oh, they believe something different, we must fight them. That has no connection to that. It's not attacks on civilians or anything like that. Her memoirs are unfortunately not a literary performance, and their method, if such can be called, is not chronological, beginning with an account of her first introduction to Lucifer vis-a-vis in the Sanctum Regnum of Charleston on April 8th, 1889. They leap in the second chapter. Over all the years intervening to minute analysis of the sentiments which led her to her conversion, and of the raptures which followed it, above all the occasion of her first communion. It is not till the third chapter do we get an account of her Luciferian education, or more correctly an introduction thereto, for the better part of 5 monthly numbers has not brought us nearer to her personality than the history of an ancestor in the 17th century, as the publisher is still soliciting annual subscriptions to the enterprise and offering a variety of advantages, after methods not unknown in England, and among the byways of periodical literature. The completion of the work is probably a distant satisfaction for those who take interest therein. And let's say, by the prayers of the faithful. So, Luciferianism is, you actualize, you realize for yourself, you form your own beliefs, and you can pick up a tradition. You can pick up a sacred text and say, oh, I believe this. But you don't have faith because you have to have faith. And the interest in Lucifer as a name for a demon is basically because science is growing in difference with the Bible. And as far as is growing in difference with the Bible, an entity that would want to enlighten us will be considered more and more evil. An entity that would want us in touch with nature, more and more evil. Now, having regard to the narrative of Dr. Batil, and having regard to the statement set forth in my second chapter, it is obvious that Miss Vaughan is a witness of the first importance as to whether there is a masonry behind masonry, which more or less manages or attempts to manage the entire society unknown to the rank and file of initiates, however higher in grade, as to whether its seat is at Charleston, with Albert Pike for its founder, and as to whether its doctrine is anti-Christian, and its cultus that of Lucifer, supported by magical wonders, concerned with sacrilegious observances, and either a disguised Satanism, are drifting in that direction. As already hinted, the mythical and miraculous element, in a word, that portion of Dr. Batel's narrative which does violence to sense and reason. Miss Vaughan has not at present imperiled her position by substantiating, but as to the points I have enumerated, she has most distinctly come forth out of Palladium to tell us that these things are so, and to reinforce what was previously stated by unveiling her private life. It is, therefore, my duty and desire to do her full justice, and with this purpose in view, I propose to recite briefly the chief heads of her memoir, so far as has been published up to date. I must have her premise at the beginning that she does not come before us with one trace of the uncertainty of assent which might have been expected to characterize the newly acquired language, not merely of Christian faith, but its Roman dialect. We find her speaking at once, and of the manner born. Could anything by possibility be narrower than certain perished sections of evangelical religion in England? It would be certain sections of ultramontane religion in France. But Miss Vaughan has acquired all the terminology of the latter, all the intellectual bitterness, all the fatuities, as one might say, in the space of 5 minutes, when she has wearied of her memoirs at the moment, or has reached, after the manner of the novelist, some crucial point in her narrative, she breaks off abruptly, brackets, Suver, and proceeds to an account of the latest wonder-working image, or a diatribe against spirit manifestations in the typical manner of the French clerical press. To be brief, Miss Vaughan has adopted, body and soul, precisely those abuses which Catholics of intelligence earnestly desire to see expunged from their great religion. She has probably never heard of the forged decretals, but she would defend their authenticity if she had. She has probably never heard of the corrupted or any versions of the epistles of St. Ignatius, but she would accept the corruptions boldly upon the smallest hint that they savored better with the hierarchy, that she would do all this apparently in good faith, on the authority of a purblind party within the Church, which exists to keep open its wounds. Now I submit that a volte-face is possible, especially in religious opinions, but that a pronounced habit of religious thought cannot be acquired in a day, so that in the history of Miss Vaughan's conversion there is more than can be discerned on the surface. The precise nature of the element which eludes must be left to the judgment of my readers, but personally I reserve my own. Out of fairness to an unfinished disposition, there is a generic difference between Dr. Battelle and Miss Vaughan. He is an ordinary human being, and if we may trust that many pictures which represent him in his narrative, exceedingly unpretending at that, we have also some portraits of Miss Vaughan, who is aggressive and good to look at, but this is not the generic distinction. Dr. Battelle, poor man, is the scion of an ordinary ancestry, within the narrow limits of flesh and blood. Miss Vaughan, on the contrary, I hope my readers will bear with me, has been taught from her childhood to believe that she was of the blood royal of the descending hierarchy, and I cannot gather from her vague mode of expression whether she has altogether rejected the legend of her descent, which is otherwise sufficiently startling. I'm having trouble speaking. My stomach's growling at me. I don't know if you can hear that. The position of authority and influence occupied by Miss Vaughan in what she terms high masonry is to be explained, as she modestly informs us, not by her personal qualities, but by a traditional secret concerning her family, which is known only to the elect magi. Miss Vaughan and her paternal uncle are the last descendants of the alchemist Thomas Vaughan, whom she terms a Rosicrucian and identifies with Irenaeus Philalethes, author of the open entrance to the closed palace of the king. On the 25th of March, 1645, she tells us, on the authority of her family history, Thomas Vaughan, having previously obtained from Cromwell the privilege of beheading the noble martyr, Laud, Archbishop of Canterbury, the title to nobility, in her opinion, seems to rest in the probability of his secret connection with Rome, steeped a linen cloth in his blood, burnt the said cloth in sacrifice to Satan, who appeared in response to an evocation, and with whom he concluded a pact, receiving the philosophical stone, and a guaranteed period of life extending over 33 years from that date, after which he was to be transported without dying into the eternal kingdom of Lucifer, to live with a glorified body in the pure flames of the heaven of fire. I can't help but think that the Hajar Aswad is given a perverted reference in these stones. You know, the philosopher's stone idea, because we're talking a metaphor for the true reality, the identity. There's the construction of consciousness, and it's upon the symbol of the construction of consciousness, but it's that the true identity is there, is somewhere. Because consciousness kind of arranges things in cubes and squares and that sort of thing, when reality is kind of not kind of rounded. So you had a round in the middle of such, symbolically you'd have a dot or a pit or a a lump or stone, a sphere, whatever. And this is the psychological diagram, the dot in the middle, the undirected, reality of it all. I'm not articulating that too well, but anyways, and the satanic stone, of course, in the Quran we have one of the first verse. I think the first verse to mention stones is hell, for whose fuel is men and stones, something like that. The heaven of fire, So people turning to the devil, oh, I'm going to be fuel for the fire, as stones are. A lot of comments about my work describing hell and demons and stuff. It's like, yeah, we're going to go to hell. It's like, okay, if I can't stop you from making those decisions. After this compact, he wrote The Open Entrance, the original manuscript of which, together with its autograph, Luciferian interpretation on the broad margins, is a previous heirloom in the family. Some 2 years later, in the course of his travels, he reached New England, where he dwelt for a month among Lenni Lenapes, and there, in an open desert on a clear night of summer, while the moon was shining in splendor, he was wandering in solitary meditation, when the luminary in question, which was in the crescent phase, came down out of heaven, and proved to be an arched bed, very luminous and wonderful, containing a vision of sleeping female beauty. This was the nuptial couch of Thomas Vaughan, and its occupant was Venus Astarte, the female Lucifer, surrounded by a host of flower-bearing child spirits, who conveniently provided a tent and provided also delicious meals during a period of 11 days. Several curious particulars differentiated these hermetic nuptials, undreamed of by Christian Rosenkreuz, from those which govern more ordinary proceedings below the latitude of the Lenni Lenapes. In the first place, goddess succubus Astarte provided the ring, which was of red gold, enriched with a diamond, and placed it on the finger of her lover. In the second place, transcendental gestation, celestial or otherwise, fulfills the mystery of generation with exceeding dispatch, for Astarte was delivered of an infant on the 11th day, independently of medical assistance, whereupon she demanded the return of the nuptial ring, and vanished with tent and sprites astride of the crescent couch. The fruit of their union was left in the arms of Thomas, who was directed to trample on all sentiments of paternal affection, and to deliver the child into the charge of a tribe of fire-worshipping Indians. He does not appear to have sued for the restitution of conjugal rights, and cheerfully surrendering the human hybrid to a family of Lenni Lenapes, together with his medallion portrait drawn by an artist from Devildom, so that the daughter might recognize her father after the method which obtains among novelists. Thomas Vaughan placed the broad ocean between himself and the scene of his marriage, and he never revisited his daughter, who, in spite of her miraculous origin, does not appear to have distinguished herself in any way, at least up to the point at present reached by the history. Miss Vaughan says that all the elect magi do not accept this legend of the blood royal, and she admits her own doubts subsequent to her conversion. As an article of intellectual faith, I should prefer the birth story of Gargantua, but it satisfied Miss Vaughan till the age of 30 years, and her father and grandfather before her, and even supposing it was fabriqué par mon Bissaïeul James de Boston, as hazarded by elect magi, whom a remnant of reason hinders. Now, there are no fire-worshipping Zoroastrians. I'm sorry, they're not. Up in the mountains of Persia, it was cold. We're not in the same situation, but they don't. Their presence of the fire is not that the fire is a god. There are people in their spells will worship candles and salt and all that other stuff. If you see candles in my video, I'm not considering the fire a god. I'm not worshiping some candle. But there are people who do that sort of thing as part of their spell. They worship the items that are being used in the spell, spirits of the items. I'm not doing that. And don't let the fact I use symbols. Oh, he must worship such and such because he's using a symbol or a grid, or it's like, things have different contexts. Stop watching horror movies if you can't distinguish reality between fiction. And, you hear accounts like this of doctors that have gotten what's that famous novel that was by a doctor that would get high on drugs with their patients, and well, she would give her patients, it's like, well, it's just therapy both ways, and this Michelle remembers something, I don't know. The memoirs of an ex-palladist have not at present proceeded further than the translation of Thomas Vaughan into the Paradise of Lucifer, but from the free and regenerated Palladium, and from other sources, the chief incidents of Mrs. Vaughan's early life may be collected and summarized briefly. We learn that she is the daughter of an American Protestant of Kentucky and of a French lady, also of that persuasion. She was born in Paris, and a part of her education seems to have been received in that city. Her mother died in Kentucky when Diana was in her 14th year, and I infer that subsequently to this event she must have lived with her father, who had considerable property in the immediate vicinity of Louisville. When the sovereign right of Plattism was created by Albert Pike, Vaughan became affiliated therewith, and was one of the founders of the Louisville Triangle, 11 plus 7, which is also 6 plus 6 plus 6. He presided at the initiation of his daughter as an apprentice, according to the right of adoption. In 1883, she was raised to the grade of companion, and subsequently to that of mistress, and at the age of 20 years, says Dr. Bataille, she crossed the threshold of the triangles, as the Palladian lodges are termed. 3 issues were published of the free and regenerated Palladium, but since the conversion of Miss Vaughan, they have been withdrawn from circulation, except among ecclesiastics of the Roman Church, and up to the present I have failed to obtain copies. For the autobiographical portions of this organ I am indebted to the notices which have appeared in the Revue Mensuelle, and they contain an account of 2 apparitions on the part of the demon Asmodeus, accompanied by phenomena of levitation and fortified by arguments against the theory of hallucination. These early experiences are, however, of minor importance, nor need I again to refer to the sensational incidents which accompanied her initiation as Templar mistress at the Paris Triangle of St. Jacques. But it appears from her memoirs that the intervention of Albert Pike was not in virtue of the supremacy of his personal authority, and that the ordeal of sacrilege was spared her by the clemency of Lucifer himself, who was supposed to appear in person at the Sanctum Regnum of Charleston, and to instruct his chiefs, Theo, Valenta, or otherwise, every Friday. Supreme dogmatic director, who had made his home in Washington, having the gift of instantaneous transportation, whensoever he thought fit, to be present in the divine boardroom. Now, Thursday sunset to Friday sunset is the Venus day of the week, so Lucifer. And the sermon day before the Sabbath is also Friday. This could be as a slander to the Islamic population in one way or another. Oh, he gives speeches on a Friday, because rather than realizing that in his own words, more like following a Jesus sort of character, Islam has been thought to be some sort of antichrist. It's like we're not anti any of the figures of the Bible. We're saying that what has been attributed to them is not quite what is the case. On the 5th of April, 1889, the good God assembled his ancients and Emirites for a friendly conversation upon the case of Diana Vaughan, and ended by requesting an introduction in 3 days' time. After the best manner of the grimoires, Miss Vaughan began her preparations by a triduum, making one meal daily of black bread, fritters of high-spiced blood, a salad of milky herbs, and the drink of rare old rebellice. Rebellice? The preparations in detail are scarcely worth recording, as they merely vary. The preparations in detail are scarcely worth recording, as they merely vary the directions in the popular chap books of magic, which abound in foolish France. At the appointed time she passed through the iron doors of Sanctum Regnum. Fear not, said Albert Pike, and she advanced, remplie d'un ardente allégresse, was greeted by the 11 prime chiefs, who presently retired, possibly for prayer or refreshments, possibly for operations and wire pulling. Diana Vaughan remained alone in the presence of the Palladium, namely our poor old friend Baphomet, whose admirers persist in presenting with a goat's head, where he is the archetype of the ass. Now remember, the term means donkey. And we have we have 4 more pages. Give me a second.